You'll never be anything but a paycheck away from failure. You know that, right? Gary said it over mashed potatoes at my mother's dining table in front of my sister's new fiancé, like he was commenting on the weather. Nobody at that table blinked. That was the part that got me. Not the sentence, the silence after it. 3 weeks later, Gary Holt walked into my office to pitch a $400,000 renovation contract, and he had no idea whose signature he needed to get it. My name is Erin Mackey. I'm 34, and until that Tuesday in October, Gary had spent 22 years telling anyone who'd listen that I was the one who didn't turn out right. He married my mother when I was 11. He brought a son with him, Tyler, who was 9, and from the very first Christmas, there was his kid, and there was me. Tyler got the bigger stocking. Tyler got driving lessons on his birthday. When I got a partial scholarship to Ohio State, Gary told my mother at dinner that some kids just aren't built for that kind of thing, and maybe I should look at community college instead. Save everyone the disappointment. I went to Ohio State anyway, working 2 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't touch. I dropped out for a semester in my sophomore year when I couldn't make rent and tuition at the same time. I never went back full-time. I finished my degree online, 6 years later, 1 class at a time, while working full days at a leasing office. Gary never let that semester go. Every family gathering for the next decade, somehow, it came up. Erin took a little detour, didn't she? Said with a smile, like it was affectionate. It was never affectionate. Meanwhile, Tyler struggled through 2 years of a business degree he never finished, and Gary called it finding himself. Tyler started a contracting company with money Gary put in himself. I found out later it was nearly $60,000, pulled from an account my mother didn't know existed until the tax paperwork showed up one spring. Tyler's company did fine for a while. Then it didn't. I didn't start fine. I started answering phones at a property management company, making $13 an hour, 26 years old, still living with a roommate because rent alone would have broken me. Nobody in my family asked how it was going. Nobody needed to. Gary had already decided the answer. What they didn't know was that I was good at the job. Genuinely good. I understood leases and vendor contracts and budget lines in a way that made my manager start handing me the difficult accounts. 4 years later, I was running acquisitions for 3 properties. 4 years after that, I was director of portfolio development for Hallbrook Group, overseeing renovation and vendor contracts across 11 commercial properties in central Ohio. I had an office on the 9th floor with my name on the door. I had never told my family the title. I'd stopped bothering to correct Gary's assumption that I was still doing that leasing thing. Correcting him had never once changed how he looked at me, so I quit trying around year 3. My mother knew, vaguely. She'd say, "Erin's doing well for herself," at gatherings in the tone people use when they're not totally sure what well means. I let it stay vague. It was easier than watching Gary find a way to make even my success sound like luck. The dinner where he said the line about the paycheck was my sister Callie's engagement dinner. Callie is my half-sister, my mother, and Gary's daughter, 26, sweet, and the one person in that house who never treated me like an experiment that hadn't worked out. She'd just gotten engaged, and the table was toasting, and somehow the conversation slid toward Tyler's company, how it had hit a rough patch, how Gary was helping him find his footing again. Then Gary turned to me. I still don't know why. I hadn't said a word in 10 minutes, and said I should consider myself lucky I had a steady little job, because some people, and here he looked right at me, just aren't built for anything bigger. That's when he said the paycheck line. My mother refilled her wine glass. Callie's fiancé studied his plate. I said, "Excuse me," and went to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub for 4 minutes before I could go back out there and finish dinner like a normal person. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that, because I used to think the story of a moment like that ends with tears, and mine didn't. What I felt was quieter and colder than that. I felt done. I didn't do anything dramatic. I went home, I went to work Monday, and I put it away, the way I'd put away every other version of that same sentence for 2 decades. I had a portfolio review that week. I had 4 vendor bids to get through for the Eastgate Commons renovation. New roofing, exterior work, parking lot repaving, about $400,000 total. A contract that would matter a lot to whoever won it because Eastgate was the first of 6 properties scheduled for the same overhaul over the next 2 years. My assistant, Priya, dropped the bid folder on my desk Thursday morning. 4 bids, she said. One's a mess, honestly. Missing half their insurance docs. I flagged it. I opened the folder that afternoon. Between calls, the way you open something you're not really paying attention to yet. The messy one was from a company called Holt Restoration and Build. I sat there for a second. Holt wasn't an unusual enough name to be sure. Then I saw the address on the letterhead. The same St. Gary's shop had been on for 15 years, and I knew. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to say that clearly, because I think people expect that part. What I felt was tired and a little sick. The way you feel when a coincidence lands somewhere you didn't want it to. I read the bid properly. It wasn't just messy. The insurance certificate was expired. The references listed were 2 jobs from 6 years earlier. There was no current workers' comp documentation, which every vendor on our properties is legally required to carry. No exceptions, because if an uninsured contractor's employee gets hurt on our property, Halbrook eats the liability. I pulled Holt Restoration's business filings that evening at home, the way I pull filings on any vendor I'm not sure about. Public record, nothing invasive, just a habit from doing this job for 8 years. 2 liens. A judgment from a supplier in Newark, Ohio for an unpaid invoice, still open. Not a company I'd have advanced past the first round, even if I'd never heard the name Holt in my life. I told myself that Thursday night that this wasn't personal. I run vendor evaluations for a living. If I waved through an unqualified bid because I happened to feel guilty about a stepfather I hadn't chosen, that would be its own kind of failure, and I'd spent too many years hearing that word to hand it to myself voluntarily. I put a note in the file. Does not meet minimum insurance and reference requirements. Recommend disqualification, and moved to the next bid. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong, because 2 days later, Priya knocked on my office door and said, "Your 2 o'clock is here. Holt Restoration. He's asking for you specifically." I hadn't scheduled a callback meeting with any vendor. I checked, and sure enough, Gary, or someone at his company, had called the front desk directly and asked to speak to the person handling the Eastgate contract, and been told that was me, Aaron Mackey, Director of Portfolio Development. Nobody had told him my last name would mean anything. Why would they? I'd been Aaron Mackey since my divorce 11 years ago. My professional name had never been Holt. I stood up from my desk, and for a second I considered having Priya reschedule it, handle it, anything to not be in that room. Then I thought about the paycheck comment, and about how many times over 22 years I'd made myself smaller so Gary wouldn't have to feel anything uncomfortable. And I said, send him in. He didn't recognize the name on the door until he was already sitting down. I watched it happen in real time. His eyes went from my face to the little brass plate that said E. Mackey, Director, Portfolio Development, and back to my face. And something shifted behind his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Not embarrassment yet, just recalibration. "Aaron," he said. I didn't. Huh. Small world. "Gary." I sat down across from him instead of behind the desk because I didn't want this to feel like a power move, even though some part of me knew it already was one, whether I wanted it or not. "I looked over your bid." "Good, good." He rubbed his hands together, the way he does when he's about to sell something. "Listen, I know the paperwork's a little behind. We've had some cash flow stuff this year, you know how it is. But the work itself, Aaron, we did the Kroger lot resurface last spring. We do good work. You remember, I used to bring you kids out to job sites?" "Gary." I kept my voice level. It cost me something to keep it level, but I did it. "Your insurance certificate expired in March. You don't have current workers' comp on file. Your 2 listed references are from before 2020, and there's an open supplier judgment against the company in Fairfield County." He stopped rubbing his hands. "I can't move your bid forward," I said. "Not because of anything personal. Every vendor on our properties has to carry current insurance. Full stop. It's not a preference, it's a liability requirement. If one of your guys gets hurt on our lot without coverage, that's on us. And I'm not authorized to take that risk no matter who's sitting across from me. You're not authorized. He said it flat, like he was trying the words out to see if they'd embarrass me. They didn't, and I watched him notice that too. Aaron, come on. This is Tyler's company now, mostly. He's trying to get it back on its feet. You could put in a word, get us an extension on the paperwork. Nobody has to know. I'd lose my job if I did that, I said. And even if I wouldn't, I don't think I would do it anyway. He sat back. For a second, I thought he was going to try the paycheck line again. Some version of it, some way of making my no about my smallness instead of about an expired insurance certificate. Instead, he said, quieter. Your mother's going to ask how this went. Then tell her the truth. Tell her the bid didn't meet requirements. That's what happened. He left without shaking my hand. I sat in my office for a long time after that, looking at the door, waiting to feel something bigger than what I actually felt, which was mostly just relief that my voice hadn't shaken. I didn't tell my mother anything. I figured Gary would tell his version, and I was right. 2 days later, she called me, using the careful voice she uses when she's been handed a story and isn't sure she believes it. Gary said you wouldn't even look at his paperwork, said you were pretty cold about it. I looked at every page, I said. His insurance is expired, Mom. There's an open judgment against the business. I can send you the public filing if you want to see it yourself. She was quiet for a second. He didn't mention a judgment. I figured. Aaron. Her voice changed, dropped the careful part. Did you do this because of what he said at Callie's dinner? I hadn't expected her to bring it up on her own. I found out later that Callie had said something to her about it weeks earlier, and my mother had been sitting with it quietly, the way she sits with most things Gary does, hoping it resolves itself without her having to. No, I said. I do this every week, Mom. Contractors who don't have their paperwork together don't get the job. That's not revenge. That's Tuesday. But you didn't have to take the meeting yourself. No, I admitted. I could have had Priya handle it. I took it because some part of me wanted him to see the door with my name on it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I'm sorry, Aaron, for a lot of Tuesdays. It wasn't the apology I would have written for her, if I'm honest. It was smaller than the 22 years deserved, and it came 11 years after I stopped waiting for it. But it was real, and she meant it. And I let myself have that instead of holding out for a version that was never going to come. The contract went to a company out of Grove City with current everything and a clean record, and Eastgate Commons got its new roof on schedule. Holt Restoration didn't get the extension Gary asked for on the paperwork because I wasn't the only person who would have had to sign off on that, and nobody else in that building had a reason to bend rules for him. I heard, secondhand, through Callie, that the business closed down entirely the following spring. Tyler took a job managing a hardware store. I didn't feel good about that exactly, and I didn't feel bad about it either. It wasn't mine to feel anything about. I hadn't done anything but my job. Gary and I haven't had a real conversation since that Tuesday in my office. He shows up at family things, sits a little further from me than he used to, doesn't offer commentary on my choices anymore. I don't know if that's growth or just quiet, and at this point, I've stopped needing it to be growth. My mother calls me more than she used to. Actual calls, not check-ins timed around holidays. Callie's wedding is in June, and she asked me to give a toast, which is a thing that would not have happened 5 years ago, when I was still the daughter. People were careful not to bring up. I used to think justice would feel like something loud, a room full of people finally seeing what I'd known all along. It wasn't loud. It was an expired insurance certificate and a closed door, and a woman who used to shrink at dinner tables, sitting up straight in a chair she'd earned, telling the truth in a level voice, and meaning every word of it. I built something Gary couldn't see coming, not because I planned it that way, but because I stopped waiting for his permission to be good at what I do. That's the part I'd tell anyone sitting where I used to sit. You don't need the person who called you a failure to take it back. You just need to stop needing them to.